turn this over? Okay. Hello, everybody. I think when I was asked to speak today, I said I was going to come and talk about politics and young people in the UK. And today I sat and watched the news and depressed myself thoroughly. So I've decided to avoid politics and just talk about young people. I think we'll be in a better place at the end of it. So I'm Ruth. I started Reclaim 10 years ago. And Reclaim is a charity that exists to support working class young people in ending leadership inequality. Now, obviously, that's a fairly big mission for a small charity in Manchester. But we believe very, very firmly that there are a lot of working class young people who've got so much talent, so much potential that's not being realised, not just in the north of England, but everywhere. But I spend a lot of my time coming down to London to talk because I think it's very, very important that the north and the south talk to each other, understand each other and work together. So our tagline is working class young people being seen, being heard and leading change. And that is because so many of the kids that I work with are in the shadows. We work with young people who've got talent, they've got ability, they've got brimming with promise, but actually people have very, very low expectations of them. And what we say is we talk about them being working class and they talk about themselves as working class because they hate being called disadvantaged. They hate being called disengaged. They hate anything that evokes pity. So our young people refer to themselves as working class proudly, and they say that they want to work to kick the stigma out of being working class. And that's what we support them in. And a lot of our work is about getting our young people to really believe in themselves, to have high hopes and high aspirations. And then we give them the support and the networks of people who can give them those chances. And I was listening to the Today Show on Radio 4 recently, and there was a 14-year-old who'd come up with an app for something wonderful that I didn't really understand. And at the end of his interview, John Humphreys kind of says, and what do you think you'll be when you grow up? And the young guy said, oh, I don't know, but I'm sure I'll be successful. And everyone laughed in a very Radio 4 way, and that was very nice. And I was listening at home just going, wow, imagine at 14, not knowing what you're going to do, fair enough, but being so sure that you're going to be a success. And then I thought about the kids that I work with and I represent, and I thought if any of them, age 14, turned round and said, I don't know what I'm going to be, but I'm going to be successful, they'd probably either get their heads kicked in or get laughed at. So my aim for our charity and the young people we work with is at 14, they feel that actually an aim for them is to be successful. And like most founders, the story of my charity is probably bound up in my own story in some way. I pretend it's not, but it is. I think I've founded the charity that I wanted for myself. And I grew up in Bradford. You'll hear in the tones, I'm not from West London. And first child of Nigerian parents. Now, it doesn't look like there's many Nigerians here, but if you know Nigerians, and everyone knows Nigerians, we have high hopes for our children. And so, therefore, I went to state schools. I was always at state schools. My dad used to make me sit the entrance exam for the local private school. I passed it. He didn't send me. He just wanted to make sure. Yeah, that was my life. And then I did my GCSEs, got a load of A grades, well done me. And my dad found a cutting in the newspaper that said that if someone got over 8 GCSEs, they were entitled to a scholarship at the local private school. So that was it. I mean, the excitement in the Ibegbuna household that night. And I was like, my politics don't allow me to go to a private school. My dad was like, I don't care, you're going. So they bought me the blazer. I was sent to, at 16, I was sent to the local private school. And it was great. It was wonderful, a big change for me, because Bradford, where I'm from, was at the bottom of the league tables nationally. And then all of a sudden I went into this different space. And I remember on the first day, the teacher saying to me, look at your timetable. And I looked, and I had 2 hours of something called critical thinking. And I said to the teacher, what's that? And I went into the room, and I always remember there were 6 of us in the room, and the housemaster, and there was tea and coffee. And I couldn't get my head around this in a classroom. There was tea and coffee. There were broadsheet newspapers. The first Iraq war was happening, and we spent 2 hours debating the war. How did we feel about it? What were the ethics of it? We challenged each other. We talked about it. There was space to reflect. And at the end of the day, we didn't write anything. We weren't working towards an exam. We just went at the end. And I went back to my state school. I won at the end of the day, and I actually spent 2 days there and went back to my state school. But when I got back to my state school, I walked into the A-level class there, and there were 27 of us. There was all kinds of nutcases in that room, a teacher who was barely holding on, and we had a curriculum and we put our heads down and that's what we did. And I thought to myself, actually, we need this. We need critical thinking. We need space to reflect and think about who we are and who we want to be, and morality and all those things. And it just strikes me that actually, why do we expect some people to be critical thinkers and do the thinking for others? It's important at every level in society that we're challenging people to be critical thinkers, so that when questions emerge like is waterboarding torture, everyone's got a view on it. So I've got here a manifesto. Our young people start with us when they're age 12. How am I doing? Okay. They start with us when they're age 12 and they write a manifesto of change they want to see in their areas. And this is the most recent one. And the bottom point, this is 12-year-old young people in Stockport. Living on a council estate is nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that's quite poignant, because actually what is actually happening is a lot of young people feel like it's a crime to be poor in this country. They feel that they're laughed at, they feel stigmatised, they feel that people have very, very low expectations of them. And I just feel walking into a space like this, you know, I had enough imposter syndrome as me coming in here and when my name was called to step on this stage. But if you're from a council estate in Darlington and you walk into this space, how do you feel? Do you feel that it really belongs to you? So we do a lot of work with our young people to encourage them to believe that any space, no matter where, belongs to them, and they can go to Sadler's Wells, they can go anywhere they want and feel that that is their space and that is for them. Because we believe that leaders can come from country estates or council estates, but there's not enough of them coming from council estates. So can we just get the first slide? Thank you. One thing I'm told constantly is that our young people are not political. Not true. Young people are massively political, they're just not party political, and I don't blame them for that. You know, when they watch PMQs, how can they feel part of that? But our young people come together once a year, they make placards for the change they want to see, they march through Manchester calling for social change, and always, you know, adults come out of M&S and Primark and see like hundreds of young people walking down the road, but they're inspired and they feel hopeful, because actually to know that the next generation is not apathetic is something that we need. And what our young people are saying is they don't want to be the same as the leaders they see. They want to disrupt that. They want to be better leaders. So they're not trying to be Theresa May. They're not trying to be Jeremy Corbyn. They want to create their own new type of leadership, because they think that we've made a bit of a hash of it, I think. So we're working to really create disruptive leaders who lead for all. I just want to play a short video for you now that the young people have produced themselves, just a couple of minutes. Thank you.
There have been 73 Prime Ministers to date. 19 of those Prime Ministers have come from one institution, from Eton College. And 6 came from Harrow School, and another 6 came from Westminster School. All these schools charge £11,000, by the way, per term. In fact, only 7 of the 73 Prime Ministers went to a state school. And not one Prime Minister has come from Salford, Moorside, Stockport, Blakely or Gorton. 41 Prime Ministers studied at Oxford or Cambridge. These institutions are dominated by privately educated people, despite only 7% of the population being privately educated. Seeing the theme here? It doesn't stop in the workplace either. Less able but wealthier young people are 35% more likely to become higher earners than bright but poor young people. Some employers at top companies use a poshness test when recruiting, discriminating against working class accents and favouring well-spoken, well-travelled individuals instead. So, when the odds are never in your favour, what do? The word disrupt means to interrupt an event, activity or process by causing a disturbance or problem. To be disruptive has 2 meanings. Firstly, it means to cause a disruption, to be troublesome, rowdy, undisciplined, attention-seeking, but there's also a second interpretation, innovative or groundbreaking, to be inventive, ingenious, original, unconventional, and fresh. Instead of simply serving the existing power structures without analysis, Reclaim encourages working-class young people to question, to challenge, and to shake up the status quo. After all, it's the current status quo that makes it so difficult for working-class people to enter into leadership positions in the first place. A disruptive leader thinks critically about the world around them in order to change it for the better. 19 prime ministers from Eton were going to change this.
Oh. That's very kind of you. I'll tell them that you clapped. Thank you. Right, okay, I've only got 5 minutes left. Can I just get the next slide, please? Okay, moving on to really important stuff now. One of the things that we believe is that young people hold the solutions to some of our most pressing social problems. This is Frances, who I would have liked to have here with me, but she couldn't make it. Frances, as a lot of you will recall, the horrific situation when young people were being groomed and sexually exploited in Rotherham and Rochdale and all those places. Frances knew a lot of girls that were caught up in those horrors. And one of the things that she said, she'd been through our programme, is it's absolutely wrong because people aren't talking to the girls about what the solutions should be. And what she did as a young woman is went out and got some of those girls who were victims of some of the most terrible crimes and got them to actually form a group together. They called the group RAIN, and the RAIN as in they wanted to be seen as queens in their community. And they went and they spoke to police officers, they went and spoke to teachers, and they went and delivered training to social services. And their point is that actually, unless you've grown up in one of their estates, unless you've been a vulnerable teenage girl who's been groomed, maybe you don't actually understand what some of the solutions should be. And this is what Reclaim is doing now. We are getting young people who faced some of the horrors that actually people at Westminster can't even understand. And these young people are formulating their own solutions. They're now training senior police officers and senior social workers in how to detect and better protect young women who are vulnerable. And this is what we truly believe, that so many of our young people, if given a platform and given a stage and if listened to, have got sensible things to say. Okay, next slide, please. And then on to Brexit, because everything eventually comes back to Brexit. On Brexit Day, I was moving house, but in the office, people were quite shocked by the result. A couple of staff members were crying, and a couple of young people turned up and said, "Why are you crying? You know, what's wrong with you?" And the staff members were explaining that they felt sad about what had happened. And the young people started talking about how they'd seen Brexit through their eyes. And one of the things that they talked about was the fact that there was so little hope. And they said that they felt like the adults had forgotten that they needed us to project hope for their future. And the young people talked about what they thought about the referendum, about the campaign, about the media, about our politicians. They talked about what they thought about the leadership. And bearing in mind, our young people are on a leadership programme themselves. And what they said was actually quite depressing. They said that they felt that the leaders hadn't led for the collective good on both sides. They said that the rhetoric that was used was depressing for everyone and excluded people. They felt that the rhetoric that was used were actually brought our community apart rather than brought people together. They talked about how leaders would run away when things had got tough. They talked about how people didn't lead for the collective good. And actually hearing that come back from 12 and 13-year-olds is quite damning. But we agreed with every word. Oh, it's not me. And what it's probably my mum. And then what they said, and this was on Brexit Day, we were still kind of rubbing our eyes wondering what kind of new world was emerging. And on that day, they decided to launch something called Team Future. And Team Future was about them saying to politicians that they wanted them to be bold, ethical and hopeful, because they were the three qualities that they thought were missing in the whole campaign. And so the young people took themselves out, they got a photographer, they got the picture taken, and they are now lobbying our local MPs to be more bold, ethical and hopeful, and getting them to sign a pledge so that young people can hold them to that. So when our politics becomes very cynical or divisive, or when politicians lie, the young people are saying, but you signed our pledge to be bold, ethical and hopeful. And I learned a lot from the young people then, because I was, watching Question Time crying, and to see how they energise themselves. They've now got 5,000 young people. This is young people who are all aged under 16. They've now got 5,000 young people signed up to be ambassadors to speak to their local MPs. Kids from council estates. Done this without support, without funding. This is just because this is their energy and drive that's leading this forward. So I decided today, when I was watching the news and listening to talk of torture and all those things, I decided to actually just turn it off and just focus on the fact that I believe that the next generation have got ideas and we need to listen to them and support them. But we don't just need to listen to young people, we need to listen to all young people, because I've worked in a very exclusive boarding school, and I've worked in a school in Moss Side, and do you know what? The kids in both were amazing, but in 10 years we'll only be listening to one of those kids from one of those schools. And so my plea to you is to please shine a light in those corners of society that no one's looking at. Thank you very much.